Hello, everyone. I hope we are all doing very well. Uh, Today, we'll be talking about risk mitigation. Look at it this way: to mitigate means to reduce its severity or to reduce the seriousness of the impact of a particular event. Therefore, let's see risk mitigation as those things we can do as risk professionals to reduce the impact of uncertainties or vulnerability in the risk landscape. This topic is quite long, and the lessons has been broken down into three parts to make it easier for us to assimilate the lessons. So we'll be looking at different strategies and insights because this is a comprehensive overview of frameworks, tools, and best practices to effectively identify, assess, and mitigate risk in the modern business environment. Once again, I am Dr. Dennis Edogun. Like I said, because of the length of this lesson, it's been broken down into three parts. During the course of these lessons, or during the course of the different parts of this lesson, we'll look at introduction to risk mitigation. We'll go through one more time some definitions and the key categories of risk. We will also revisit risk assessment process just to refresh our memory from previous lessons. And we'll look at common risk mitigation strategies. We'll revisit or review some essential tools and techniques for risk mitigation. We'll also talk about emerging risk trends for the year 2025, and we'll talk about managing digital and cyber risk. Digital and cyber risks are on the rise these days, so we need to be aware of the tools and techniques available to mitigate this risk. And we'll talk about best practices in risk mitigation. And after that, we'll go through some case studies. One of the case studies come from the healthcare industry and the other from the financial services. All this will be towards the end of the lesson in part 3. Let's go. Why risk mitigation matters? Why do we need to mitigate risk? It's very important because the business environment today is very volatile. Whether you're an established business or a small business, there are risks in everything that we do, even as individuals. So it becomes important to be aware of what we can do to minimize the impact of those uncertainties. And we'll look at minimizing the impact or mitigating risk. We always help to protect the value of the organization. It has to ensure that business continues. Business continuity is so important. What that means is that life still happens irrespective of what we do. So if life does happen and there is an incident, how quickly do we bounce back? How quickly do we, you know, reopen our shops and be ready for business again after an attack, for instance? So that's why it's important. It helps us maintain critical operations during disruptions through proactive planning and response strategies. And we're going to learn about those strategies. Also, it enables strategic growth. Every business want to grow. A static business won't survive competition. So growth is always on the mind of every entrepreneur. And to grow means first to prevent failure or prevent being wiped out of the face of the earth. So enabling growth helps to create confidence, to pursue opportunities by balancing risk taking with appropriate controls or control measures, such that while we do that, while we take some calculated risk towards growth, we are also able to mitigate everything that may come unexpectedly. Research shows that organizations with mature risk mitigation capability have 69% more likelihood to achieve its or their strategic objectives. Research also shows that 58% better that organizations with risk mitigation strategy in place are 58% better at anticipating and responding to market changes. Again, same research indicates that 74% more resilient during economic downturns or crises. These research are very, very enlightening because it gives us a basis to want to mitigate our risk. Now, like I said at the beginning, we're going to go through a little bit of definition just to remind us of what some terms and terminology stands for. First and foremost, what's risk? What's risk? Simply, risk is anything that might prevent you from achieving your goals, from achieving your organizational objective. By way of definition, I will say risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. Uncertainty because life is so dynamic, things are changing every day. We are here right now, we don't know what happened in the next minute. So the effect of uncertainty on objective. So risk is often expressed in terms of combination of the consequences of an event and the associated um, likelihood or probability of the occurrence. That's to say, risk is a function of the likelihood of an event happening and the consequences of or impact if the event eventually occurs. Then organization takes certain decisions based off their risk appetite. As you have appetite for food, appetite for drinks, and appetite for different other things, organizations also should have appetite. You don't want to bite more than you can chew, as the saying goes. Therefore, risk appetite can be defined as the amount and type of risk that an organization is willing to pursue or retain. It reflects the organization's risk management philosophy and influences its culture and operating style. So based off the risk capital of an organization, there are certain risks they can accommodate, there are certain risks they cannot take. Then let's also look at risk tolerance. Sometimes people tend to, you know, interuse the terms risk appetite and risk tolerance. They are two different things. That's why I'm providing these definitions to guide us. Risk tolerance is the acceptable variation relative to the achievement of objectives. Operating within risk tolerance provides management with greater confidence that the entity will achieve its objective. There are certain things you can't tolerate. There are certain risks you want to tolerate. So that's why it's important. Other terminology that we're going to come across as we proceed in this lesson are inherent risk, residual risk, risk owner, risk register, and key risk indicator. I know most people are familiar with the word key performance indicator, But in risk management, we also have key risk indicator. And inherent risks are risks before any controls or mitigation are applied. So at the beginning, when you identify your risk, those risks you identify before you put in place control measures are the inherent risk. Residual risk. Residual risk can be defined as risk that remains after controls are implemented. Like I said, no matter what we do, there must be some level of risk involved. And mitigation means putting things in place to reduce the severity of the impact. Then, in an attempt to control risk, we need to assign roles and responsibilities to different parties within the organization. Therefore, risk owner is that person responsible for managing a specific risk. Because if roles and responsibilities are not clearly defined, there might be some gray areas, and those gray areas are potential risk. So it's important for us to be aware of who does what and at what time. Then risk register is something else we need to define, and is a document that lists your identified risk and their characteristics. When we sit around a table to identify our risk using the various methodology discussed previously, we need to list them down. We need to list down all of those risks. When we list them down in a document, that becomes our risk register. But to make the risk register complete, we need to list this list down with their characteristics so that it's clear to everybody concerned. Finally, we look at the key risk indicator, and is defined as a metric used to measure risk exposure. With these definitions, as we encounter these different terms across the lesson, it will become clear to you what they mean. Now, I define risk initially as the product of the likelihood and consequence, the product of the probability of an event happening, and the impact if it does happen. So, to be able to visualize the magnitude of a particular risk event, it becomes important to use some quantitative methodology to calculate, to estimate the magnitude of the risk. And that's why this um, chart becomes important. It will become clearer when we go to the next slide, as we can see here. This chart visualizes how you can calculate your risk based on the definition. As you can see, on the vertical axis, we have the likelihood or probability. And on the um, horizontal axis, we have the consequences or impact. So it makes it easy for you to be able to estimate the magnitude of a particular event. Let's assume a particular event has a likelihood of 2, which means the event is very unlikely to happen. But it might still happen though. So, and it's given on a scale of 1 to 5, is given the number 2. So if an event has a likelihood of 2, and let's assume that particular event also has the consequence or impact of 3. 2 multiplied by 3 gives you 6, which shows that that particular event is moderate. Yes, you must still put mitigation in place, but attention will be paid first to the events that are within this red zone. That's to say, if an event, for instance, has a likelihood of happening or 5, which means it's almost certain it's going to happen. Let's also assume that the impact is 4. 4 multiplied by 5 gives us what? 20. What this means is that if this event happens, it's catastrophic. So when we do risk analysis and evaluation, because of the fact that it's almost impossible to have all of the resources required to manage all the risk at the same time, then this chart gives us the ability to now prioritize. We first and foremost focus our attention on the catastrophic events and put in place controls that will ensure that if they happens, the impact are minimized. So that's why this color coding becomes very, very important. The red zones, you want to do everything possible to prevent those events from occurring. The amber zone is also there. It's high, but it's not catastrophic. The orange zone is moderate, and any risk that fall within the green zone are very, very low. Because they are low, you can address those later, but first and foremost, you pay more attention first to the red zone. I hope this is clear. Now let's go further to look at some key categories of risk. Organizations are often segmented, let me use that word, from the strategic level to the operational level or to the tactical level. Across these different levels, there are different kinds of risk organization faces. First is the strategic risk. Strategic risks are risks related to business decisions, strategic goals, and market positioning. It includes competition, changing market trends, and planning for plan. This is very important. In every market, in every business, competition is high. So it's very important to scan the environment from time to time to be aware of what your competitors are doing. Following strategic risk, you also have financial risk. No business exists without finances. As a matter of fact, finances are the lifeblood of every business. So it becomes very critical or crucial to pay attention to financial risk. And these are risks involving financial assets such as cash flow, debt management, market changes. It includes credit, liquidity, and currency risk. Businesses are done globally these days. And when you trade between countries or different countries of the world, currency, the value of currency fluctuates from time to time. And we need to put certain mitigation steps in place to ensure that if the value fluctuates, it does not have a catastrophic impact on our business or on our ability to make profit. Compliance risk is something else. And these are risks related to legal, regulatory, and contractual obligations. It includes penalties for non-compliance, legal issues, and policy violation. And every part of the world are governed by rules and regulation. And we want to play within the rules. Reputational risk is another risk that is so important because once your reputation is damaged, it's often difficult to redeem yourself. And reputational risks are risks to company image and standing. It involves brand perception by your customers or the general public relations crisis, social media backlash, and ethical concerns. Again, we have operational risk. The day-to-day activity of the business also have risk inherent in them. So operational risks affecting day-to-day operations includes process failures, system outages, supply chain disruptions, and even human errors. Now, we have cybersecurity risk. Today, cybersecurity risk has become so common. So these are threats to digital assets and information security. It includes data breaches, ransomware attacks, and system vulnerabilities. So we must put certain things in place which we are going to see later on in order to prevent this from happening, because the impact can be very, very huge. Other categories of risk involve external risk, human capital risk, project risk. When you do project, you want to get engaged, schedule delays, scope creep, and resource constraints. This way, you are able to ensure that your projects are done within schedule and within budget. Now, to assess this risk, there is a process, there is a workflow, because risk assessment usually encompasses three major steps. You identify, evaluate, you analyze, evaluate, then you propose solution, and you monitor to ensure that the solution you are implementing are operational or they are useful. So first and foremost, like we discussed in previous lessons, risk identification, there are different tools and techniques we can use, such as brainstorming session, historical data analysis, SWOT analysis, expert interview. Risk analysis, there are quantitative and qualitative methodologies that can be used to quantify or to estimate risk. Risk evaluation then is to compare risk levels against established criteria. Risk appetite review, ranking, and threshold definition are very important concepts in evaluating your risk. Risk treatment. See risk treatment as, just like an individual having gone to the hospital for doctor visits. Doctors may request, sampling of your blood or urine for analysis. And at the end of the day, based off the result of those analyses, solutions are proffered, which might involve maybe some drugs to be taken and all of those. So, in treating risk, there are usually four major approaches. One is to say, well, let's avoid this, let's not take part in this. Then you can transfer your risk. Insurance is a huge tool in risk transfer. You can also reduce the risk. You can accept some of the risk. There are certain things you can say, okay, well, because the severity is low, we accept this. If it happens, there's a contingency plan in place to do that. Now, while you put in place all of those control measures, it becomes crucial to monitor and review from time to time. So it helps us to track risk and effectiveness of controls over time. So these are very important concepts, and the implementation of robust risk mitigation strategy is crucial to the success of organizations. Thank you very much, and do not forget, like, comment, subscribe for more risk smart insights. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again in my next class or in my next lessons. God bless you.